weather report. Today we're going to talk about the future of Catholic education. And, well, Brett, is there a future to Catholic education?
Yes, there is. It's called homeschooling. But going to that building and having the nuns or the Christian brothers teach your children, that is going the way of, I don't know, VCRs. It's this year with the coronavirus has really put a lot of schools out of business, and those that are not out of business yet are headed that way. Things could change. There are many, many hyper dedicated people in Catholic schools, but they're fighting a losing battle. They're fighting a losing battle because Catholic schooling, especially at the elementary and high school level, was able to be made available because of the vocations of brothers and sisters. Those brothers and those vocations of teaching vocations of brothers and sisters are nearly extinct. So you don't have to pay those people very much. You have to pay other people who are not as educated, frankly. Even if they went to school, they're not educated in the faith. They're not consecrated. This is a job for them. Even no matter how dedicated they are, it's a job for them. They need health insurance, and I've had some very dedicated teachers. In the town I live in, it was a town of 50,000 people when I grew up, and there were 3 Catholic schools, each one attached to a parish, and then there was one high school. That high school had combined 3 Catholic high schools into one, because that already was the beginning of the end. And then one by one, each of the elementary schools were consolidated with each other, finally ending up with one elementary school and one high school. Now the elementary school is gone. The only thing left is a K through 12 institution that is running on fumes. And that's the way it's going. Even in, for example, in the Archdiocese of Baltimore, there are many fine Catholic schools of long tradition, especially at the high school level. One of them just closed this year. But they're going to open a new one. Even though they let one close, they're going to open a new one with a new building and new people and new everything, which, good for them, but then why are they closing one? I don't know. It seems rather odd. So that is my view of what's happening. Meanwhile, there's a huge homeschooling. That's what's happening. The brick and mortar stuff is going away. It's too expensive. And what people are doing instead is they're teaching their children at home. And I think Catholic schooling in the elementary and high school level needs to be, the focus and the resources need to go toward homeschooling. One man's opinion.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And I think the reason I even thought about bringing up this topic of the future of Catholic education was because Tim Gordon ended up getting fired. I think he said Black Lives Matter is a terrorist organization, and his school fired him. And he, on Taylor Marshall's show, he was talking about how he was from a pretty conservative area, and they were kind of tolerant of his... he's not really a trad, but he was, Catholic. I mean, I guess that's always helpful to have a theology teacher who's Catholic, as opposed to some of these other schools. I know there's, I think his name is Rich Reho. He's on Twitter, and he's a theology teacher at a Catholic high school in Chicago, and you can imagine what kind of stuff he comes up with. I mean, he's all about the McCarrick agenda.
Oh yes, I love that.
So when you have, that's just one example, but when your theology teacher doesn't believe in Catholicism, what's the point of the entire school? I thought that Catholic education was to, I guess, build the philosophy through St. Thomas Aquinas, and basically just relate all of your education from the single perspective of, we're Catholics, and this is our primary purpose in life, and everything else builds out of that. So, I guess, you pay tuition for Catholic schools, often a lot, and Catholic high schools are becoming more like prep schools
Very
at,
much.
at this point, especially the Jesuit-run organization,
All of
Jesuit
them.
high schools.
All of them are like that.
Yeah.
It's a very expensive bill. You know, the high school in my town is one of the cheapest, and it's $6,000 a year.
Yeah, and that's not, I mean, not something to scoff at either. So,
No, it's not something to scoff at. That's a lot of money.
so are you? I guess it's really what priority? What are your priorities? So I actually recorded a video a while back about the Land O'Lakes agreement, and maybe we'll get into that a little bit. And it was about the universities.
Yes.
An agreement for Catholic universities.
Wait a minute, Catholic universities. University is an invention of the Catholic Church. All other universities are other universities. A real university is a Catholic university. Whatever you were saying, I'm sorry. But that's just, people just like blow that over, like, oh, let's go to a real university. No, a real university would be a Catholic university, invented by the Catholic Church. Just for fun.
Yeah, but one point I made about that was, okay, so these Catholic universities, they're charging a lot for tuition. Now, is the quality of education in those universities higher than just a public university that's probably half the cost? I don't know. In a lot of cases, probably not. And if you're not getting the Harvard quality education, what do they provide? Do they provide you Catholicism? Often they provide you heretical Catholicism, which I guess heretical, that's not Catholicism, but you know what I'm saying, though.
Absolutely.
So you're paying extra money so that you can learn heresy.
Yeah.
So in a lot of cases, you're better off attending a secular university because you're saving money and you're not learning heresy because they're not trying to present it as Catholicism.
Well, that is the theory.
So that was one of my points.
That is the theory. I know that I went to a fine Catholic college at the time, back in 1982, and that was my first introduction to homosexuality, because there was a homosexual organization on campus. It was my first exposure to abortion, where I sat at another table, and that was openly discussed by students there. So yeah, I learned a lot at Catholic University.
So do you want to talk a little bit about the Land O'Lakes agreement? I know I mentioned it in the previous video, and I'll just link that down below. But would you like to maybe talk about the Land O'Lakes agreement, or? So
No.
it was okay. It was started.
Nah, I don't, because it was the beginning of the end of the Catholic in Catholic University. There's a famous quote that we can't let clerics decide what's going to be discussed at a university. That's not what it says. No credentials, but it's what has happened since the Land O'Lakes Agreement in 1967, signed by Mr. McCarrick, yes, is that most Catholic universities have become governed by a secular board of directors. And that board of directors, they're secular, they're not religious, and eventually everything drifts. By the time I went to Catholic college in 1982, things had drifted quite a bit. Oh, I did learn how to drink at Catholic University too. I do need to mention that. I forgot. But I'm sorry, go on.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Land O'Lakes agreement, that it was the beginning of the end, and it was started, I guess it was formed by Notre Dame priest, was it Father Theodore Hesper?
Himself.
I think that's what his name was. What's interesting, I just wanted to point out about Notre Dame, there's a presidential candidate for the Democrats recently, from South Bend, Indiana.
Yes.
Pete Buttigieg?
Buttigieg.
But okay, however you say that. Yeah, but he was invited to be like a guest professor at one of the courses at Notre Dame. And so
he's married.
He's married to a man.
To a man, yes.
So
he's married to a man.
So I mean that's the type of quality education you're getting at Notre Dame. I mean maybe he is very smart in what course he will be teaching, but he's not representing the Catholic faith. And actually that's another point where some Catholic high schools, they've come under fire for firing openly homosexual teachers.
Yes. Absolutely.
But some of them chose not to fire. Like there's a Jesuit school in the Archdiocese of Indianapolis that chose not to fire someone like that, even though I would presume that they sign a contract that says, I will adhere to all the teachings of the Catholic faith.
Yeah, but you can't hold them to that. Love is love.
You can't hold them to a contract. You heard it here. But all right, well that wraps up what I have. Do you have anything else for?
I got nothing.
All right.
Well,
We have
wait,
a
we have
guest.
a question from the studio audience.
I want to say I have a question and a couple comments, and I am your biggest fan,
Yay!
John and Brett. I watch your show every week, but I just wanted to tell you that I agree with you when you say that a secular school, it costs less than the education at a so-called Catholic institution. And then when you come to think about it, the degree is actually better for a lot of majors at the secular institution. And so I just think that if these institutions are not Catholic, then I really don't know why you would want to go there. So that's my comment number one. And comment two that I have is, you mentioned Notre Dame University and Catholic education. And I wanted to point out to you that Dr. E. Michael Jones has written and talked much about Notre Dame. I believe his book is called Is Notre Dame Still Catholic? And he has also written and spoken things about the Land O'Lakes conference that you mentioned. I know a lot of people, when they think about Land O'Lakes, they think about butter, but it was also about Catholic education. Now, I have my first question is, do you gentlemen know if Catholic school used to be free? Because I heard that in the past, Catholic school was free. What can you tell me about that?
I can tell you that in my personal experience, my dad had to work very hard to put us all through Catholic school. I don't know if there was free Catholic school in the past. I hope there was at one point.
I would say, well, like in terms of seminaries, there was at one point a high school was a seminary. It was like a pre-seminary thing where
Right.
parents would send their kids. I don't know the cost of that, but I know my grandfather actually went to one of those high schools, and obviously he didn't become a priest. Well, not obviously. He didn't become a priest, by the way. So I hope I hope that that's helpful information. But I don't know if that answered your question, sir, or not.
That was a good question. I have another question, and that is for Brett. You mentioned about the closing of the brick and mortar schools, but I would like to get an opinion on what do you think about if there was a Catholic school online that was run by real nuns and priests and taught real Catholicism. Do you think such a online school would be successful today?
I think they would have a lot of people looking into the option, absolutely. And more, as those large families who want Catholic education for their schools would love to have religious people, consecrated religious, involved in at least some form. I think that would be great. And part of the nice thing about Catholic schools going online is there's a lot of brick and mortar still available. So, for the things that you can only do in person, those things can happen at old facilities, at churches, at halls. I would think it would be successful. I believe there are some things out there, and I will look into them and see what may be available. And at a future time, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, this would be a good follow-up video to follow up on this. I think one point, it'd actually be helpful to have like religious priests, nuns, brothers, to help out with faith formation first, and then, obviously help out with the schools as well, but it would be helpful to have them actually involved in, teaching the children.
It would, but first you need the bodies. You need actual vocations. The vocations there are barely any vocations to the priesthood. It's sort of turned a corner, but there's a long way to go, and there are some orders from nuns. I haven't heard of any orders of brothers under any growing at all. So that will have to come first.
So, to close, your prediction on the future of Catholic high schools. What do you think will happen, say, in the next 10 years?
They'll close.
Pretty much all of them, except the SSPX ones. And then the future of Catholic colleges. Do you have any predictions for those?
There'll be less and less, and what will happen is they will one by one lose their ability to be identified as Catholic. This has happened in Belgium. There was an order who they started psychiatric hospitals. They have 12 psychiatric hospitals in Belgium. And Belgium legalized euthanasia. So the boards that ran these hospitals for the orders decided to comply with that law and perform euthanasia on, mentally unstable people. The order decided that was a bad idea, but they've lost control of those hospitals. Those hospitals will still run, but the Vatican, to its credit, has decided that those hospitals can no longer identify themselves as Catholic. So I anticipate a lot of that happening in colleges. It's already happened in some colleges. In St. Anselm in Manchester, New Hampshire, it's happening it's happening to Benedictines up there. They're losing control of their college. That's how it'll happen, and it'll continue to happen. There'll be some holdouts. There's a list from the Cardinal Newman Institute. They list real Catholic schools, real Catholic universities. The list gets smaller every year.
Yeah, I think there was 15 in the most recent one.
There were. Mount St. Mary's just went.
It dropped off. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Brett.
It's good to be here.
This has been the Weather Report. We're the Laity. We will not be silent. Thank you so much for watching.